Welcome to another edition of the Bootleg Football Podcast, Struggle Bus edition, because it is after 10 at night when we're recording this. We have been riding the Struggle Bus for going on an hour and a half now with technical difficulties and trying to figure out the recording process on top of a very long week for both of us. A lot of grinding tape as we kind of get closer to the NFL draft. So it has been a very long week. Very, very, very long week. We've definitely earned our drinks tonight, but happy to be bringing yet another episode to you guys. So I'm going to start off the way we always start off, and especially on a day like today. EJ, how you feeling, and what are you drinking?
I'm feeling better because we get to talk about football. I am, like you said, struggling. It's been a very hard week. It's been a very long week. But this is a great break. It's nice to be able to look at 10 guys that we like in the 2020 draft. We're going to call it 10 gems. We're going to do a defensive edition. Then we're going to do an offensive edition to follow up on that. But these are just 10 guys we like. It isn't the best 10 or our favorite 10 even. It was just 10 guys we liked as we looked at them. So I have a little whiskey and Coke tonight. I am finishing off my Jameson Black Barrel. I didn't really have enough to pour it straight, so dropped a little Coke in there and called it good because we needed something to make this week slide away a little bit more quickly. It has not been fun, but I think the conversation is going to be a good one, so I'm looking forward to it. What do you have?
I have a new addition to my little whiskey collection I just picked up this week. A little bit of Eagle Rare, which I know is not actually rare, but it's my first bottle I've ever had. It's always kind of considered like Buffalo Trace's greatest contribution to humanity because it's a 10-year bourbon that's only like $33, which is outrageous value. And so I've never had it before. I picked it up, and man, people were not kidding. This thing is absolutely outstanding. You can taste how long it was in the barrel. It's very oak forward. You get a little bit of the classic bourbon vanilla, some of the spice on the back end, the barrel spice, but it's a lot more muted, I would say, compared to some of the spicier younger bourbons. It's a lot more mellow, but you definitely get a lot of the oak in it, and it is absolutely phenomenal. I don't know why this is less than $40, but it is. So if you guys go to your local store and you see a bottle of Eagle Rare, highly recommend you pick it up because it makes tough days like this one really feel a lot better. But you know, I'm excited to kind of get back into actually talking about the draft. We can get away from free agency for a little while. And I do want to note, yes, I understand the Brandon Cooks trade just happened. That just happened a few hours ago, actually, from us recording this. I don't want to talk about it because I'm a Texans fan that's already been through a lot. And I acknowledge this is awful. This whole offseason's been awful. It's part of the reason why I'm drinking tonight. Because that is... it is so horrific that I'm just not even going to bother talking about it. Because you all know it's horrific. I don't need to pile on for my own sanity's sake. So I just want to say, as a Texans fan, this is horrible. I now understand why Eagles fans were so mad at Chip Kelly. Because the same exact thing is happening to Houston. It is terrible to go through, and I cannot wait for this era of Texans football to be over because it is utterly excruciating. And I'll
There's
leave it at
something
that.
great about it, though.
What's that?
You know, Brandon Cooks has been traded twice before for a pick, and both times it was a first-round pick. So at least Bob didn't do that.
Yeah, probably because he didn't have one to give away.
Whoa, come on. You know, you're just taking the silver lining right off the cloud there, Brett. Yeah, no, you're right. We talked before the show about the Brandon Cooks trade because I was pretty busy today and didn't hear that it had gone on. Brett filled me in, and there was a small pause, and I just said, well, that sucks. And that's where we're going to leave it. That sucks, and we're not going to talk about it. We're going to talk about things we want to talk about. We're going to talk about things we like talking about. We're going to talk about great guys in the draft. So before we get that going, any overall thoughts on the defensive class this year? Because there's been a lot of talk about wide receivers for sure. The class started off with some strong talk about defensive backs, specifically corners, being really strong. As you've started to go through it, you're deeper into it now. What are your overall impressions of the 2020 defensive draft class?
Other than edge, I think it's really, really good. Again, at edge, there's really only kind of two really amazing talents that I think can fit on any team. That's obviously Chase Young and Yetur Gross-Matos. I'm higher on Gross-Matos than a lot of other people, but I really believe in him, and I think both him and Young are going to be studs. But after them, I think there's a severe drop-off in like just pure edge talent. There's some guys that provide edge versatility, your Zach Bonds, your Josh Uches. I'm going to get into Uche in a little bit. Kaylavon Chason, I think, is a good an outside linebacker, like a 4-3 Sam. Like he's a Robin. He's not a Batman. I've used that term quite a bit on the show. There's very few Batmans in this edge class, but at every other position, defensive tackle, linebacker, corner, safety, the kind of the pure nickel category that's emerged over the last decade or so, all of them have just Batmans all over the place. And so it's a really good defensive class outside of that kind of, top tier edge group. And it's really versatile. There's tons of versatility. There's tons of speed. And I'm really excited to see where all these guys go, because I think a lot of defenses around the league are going to get a lot better in a few weeks.
Yeah, and a lot faster. You brought it up. There's a ton of speed, and some of the areas that people have not talked about as much, we're gonna dive into tonight. I'm going to talk about one of the off-ball linebackers. You are as well. Tons of speed there, and a little bit, I'd say, sneaky depth. It's not that they're blue chips all over the place. That's not what we're trying to say. But there are a lot of guys that can play roles, and really bring some juice to defenses. And I think it's the same way when you start looking at safety. You're right about the edge class. There is a big plateau right at the top. And then a lot of guys that are going to contribute, but down the board sort of a way, not a shining star A+ going right to all pro kind of a way. Defensive tackle is the same way as maybe linebacker, where you start digging into it, and there's a lot of different types of talent in the defensive tackle class and some really solid guys in there. I was impressed with the depth as I dug in this last weekend, as you know, because I bombarded you with texts and emails and look at this. I went through about 9 guys in the defensive tackle class and a couple of the defensive ends. Just a lot of interesting guys there, and guys you can get value down the board with. So it's been a lot of fun to dig in and sort of see where the strengths lie and see where some of those sort of down the board values, 3rd, 4th rounders who could really come in, contribute, maybe even start if your team's a little short. And I think it's going to be, like you said, fun to see where all these guys go, especially on day 3, and how they land, where they hit the system. You mentioned nickel as well, and there's just so many nickels in this draft that are really, really good.
Tons of them.
So yeah, I think it's going to be a fun draft class to look forward to. So
yeah, so we're gonna kind of go through 10 gems of defense in this class. Again, not everybody's going to be first round picks. Not all of them are even in our top 5 for certain position groups, but just guys that we really like, especially at their value, where they're likely to go. 10 guys that we think are going to be around the league for a long time. So we'll kind of go back and forth here. My number 1 is somebody that I really dug into this past week, because I kind of saved DB for later. And that's Cal safety Ashtyn Davis, who, I mean, I got about 2 games in, and I was like, man, I think he's better than Xavier McKinney, who's been pegged as kind of like, the safety 1 this year, or by a lot of analysts. But everything that McKinney does, I think Ashtyn Davis can do it and do it better. I mean, he plays single high, he plays in the box, they'll put him in the slot. He's got excellent fluidity and range. He's physical in the box. He's intelligent. He's experienced. He's an all-American hurdler. I mean, he's legitimately one of the best athletes in all of college football, and probably going to be one of the best athletes in all of the NFL. And to go with, instincts and intelligence and physicality and range and ball skills, like he's kind of the complete package at safety. And if you watch the Oregon game in particular, I mean, Justin Herbert must have this dude in his nightmares, because there wasn't a single throw deep down the field that Davis wasn't all over. I mean, whether it was in the seams, he picked them off when they were kind of playing a match cover 3, and he carried number 2 and undercut it, because again, he's a legit 4-4 guy, and undercutting a a post from sail technique and match cover 3 is not easy to do. I mean, there's very few safeties even in the pros that can do that. So I think Davis is going to be a stud at the next level, and I really love everything I see with him.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring him up because I just finished watching him last night, started watching him the night before. I'd seen him in, again, film before this, but when I study a player, I study just that player. I'm not one of those guys that can watch an entire defense and pick out 3 or 4 great performances on every play. I focus on one guy, and that's how it works best for me. So I did my focus work on Ashtyn Davis 2-3 days ago, and knew he was fast, knew he was really intelligent, knew he was very experienced, thought he was pretty physical, but got to see some ways that he's physical on the field. Like you said, he doesn't just play single high. He's got speed. He's got range. He definitely has instincts. He's calling the defense for Cal in the back end and getting people aligned. That didn't always go perfectly, but I'm not exactly sure that was his fault, but we both saw it. There were definitely times when the Cal defense got burned. But what were your favorite things? What was the sort of top skill, if you had to say, like being in the box, blitzing, run stop, man coverage, zone coverage? Like if you had to pick out of those 4 or 5 things, like where did you think he was the best, like just excelled?
I would probably say deep, where he can just kind of keep his eyes on the quarterback and just kind of wait for a shot and then use his speed to just go absolutely obliterate whoever's on the receiving end of it.
Yeah, my favorite thing about Davis watching him was largely deep. I would say medium to deep, but man coverage. And he is so fast and he is so fluid. He doesn't fear anybody. He's not a guy that's going to gamble or bail early. In fact, sometimes he doesn't even sort of turn until people get by because he knows he can just turn around and run with them. Like literally run right next to them in their hip pocket, 15, 20, 25 yards downfield. He's got his hand on the guy, and he looks like he's kind of loping. He's not even opened up. And the more I saw that, the more I thought, and you may not like this, but this is my theory. I told you I was going to hold the theory till the pod. Would you play Ashtyn Davis at corner?
I mean, he could. He's a legit 4-4 guy. He plays with physicality. He's got good hips. Because remember, you can't be an All-American hurdler unless you've got really good hips.
No, he's super fluid. That's
super fluid.
He's big. He's over 6 foot. He's over 200 pounds. He runs like a deer.
He's thick though. He's thicker than a lot of corners, but he's just as fast. So
right. So I mean, you've got a big physical guy that's really smart, can play press, could play trail easily, understands what the defense is doing, and could play against any kind of receiver on the outside. Could play against little quick guys, could play against big guys who are strong, want to get off the jam. He's got all that. And I think he'd be really good because, again, those were the plays where he shined. He does all those things, and it was really cool to see his versatility, see that he was down near the line, not just occasionally. He's a good blitzer. His timing on the blitz is pretty nice. He brings some physicality. He's not a great tackler. He's okay. Hitter. He's a great hitter, but I watched the Arizona State game first, and he missed 3 or 4 tackles handily. Like
he'll get broken down in space. He's better if he just doesn't stop moving.
Right. No, I fully agree. When he waits, he can get on one foot or the other and flail, really.
Yeah.
But how many corners do you know that aren't great tacklers? There's a few in this draft that have that reputation, but I think you could take Ashtyn Davis with his size, speed, physicality, and awareness of what the quarterback's doing and play him at outside corner. And I don't know actually why you wouldn't.
You know what would be interesting? The Bills don't have a first-round pick anymore because they gave it up for Stephon Diggs. But if they did, they're pretty set at safety for now.
Yep.
But the system that they run, which is predominantly zone, they run a lot of cover 2, which in their style of cover 2, the corners are pressing and then sagging off. And with his speed, explosiveness, physicality, intelligence, him playing corner opposite Trey White, specifically in that system, I think you're right. Like, that could work. I doubt he slips to their pick in round 2. In fact, I would be stunned if he did. But if he did, and they took him, and they just wanted to get him on the field because they already have Hyde and Poyer, one of the best safety duos in the league. But if they just wanted to get him on the field, schematically speaking, I think you're right. That could work.
And the other thing is, as we move to a more sort of, everybody's talking about it, positionless defense, right? You start him at boundary corner, his guy floats inside. Now he's in the slot, and you bring him on the blitz. He's got the physicality to do it. He's very quick. He times it well. He had several hurries in the ASU game coming off the edge, not only from right at the line, but also from the second level, kind of like the linebacker level, where he was sort of sitting, looking a little bit like a nickel. Maybe they flexed out their tight end. He'd stand there and just come through the gap, and he comes through so quickly because he's got burst. You could do a lot with him, and it wouldn't have to be traditional sort of boundary corner, but he could play boundary corner. He runs that way. He turns that way. He uses his hands on receivers that way. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, man, like, why would you not maximize his value and put him, on really good receivers? Because down the field, he is right next to those guys.
Yeah. I mean, 4.4 is 4.4. So
and like you said,
you're not wrong about that.
Straight line speed's one thing, but his ability to turn, the looseness in his hips, how fluid he is downfield, moving, cutting, stopping. He's a tremendous athlete, and he is never very far. Like, I don't remember a single down where it wasn't a busted coverage, where he was, where he knew which guy he had, he stayed on the guy, where he was more than like literally arm's length away from the guy. Nobody runs by him.
Yeah, I mean, I watched 5 games of him, and I can't really think of one either.
Mm-mm.
Where it's like would he technically be beat? Maybe, but I mean, there's no throws against him that aren't super tight window. He's never going to give you anything easy, which, I mean, if you have a secondary full of guys that aren't going to give you easy throws, that's going to add up to being a pretty damn good defense. So I'm right there with you.
That's my wild hair theory about Davis. I really liked what I saw on tape. I wasn't wild about his tackling, but versatility, alignment-wise, smarts, his ability to run with people deep, which is where people are really talking about Ashtyn Davis in that deep third. I don't want to say it's unmatched because I haven't finished the rest of the class, but it's got to be top 2 or 3 for sure.
I would be stunned if anybody, other than maybe Delpit, is matching him in a straight up foot race. I guess if you consider Simmons a safety, but I don't. But
yeah.
Anyway, who's your first guy? Who's your first of 10 gems?
My first guy is a guy that we actually watched together for the first time, Justin Blacklock at TCU.
Yeah.
And we did, when I was down at your place about a month ago, a little more, 5 weeks ago now. We stayed up late one of the nights. I don't remember which night it was, but we just kind of OD'd on DT tape. We just kind of sat on the couch and broke open the whiskey and went through probably, it was a combination of highlights and game film, and we probably went through 7 or 8 guys. We just watched a whole bunch of DTs because we hadn't really dug into the DT class. And the film I saw of Blacklock at that point, I thought he was good. I mean, there's definitely flashes, but I think we watched Justin Madubuike from Texas A&M right after him, and I actually came away from that night thinking, oh, those are 2 guys that I'm going to have to dig into because I really think they're pretty similar. And this last weekend, again, I dug back into the DTs and did my individual work and watched Madubuike first and then came back to Blacklock, and Blacklock really blew me away on the second viewing. And this will happen sometimes. You see a guy the first time and you either think, oh, man, he's amazing, or, oh, he's a dog, or he's kind of in the middle. And you go back a second time and your opinion really changes because you watch different games or you concentrated on him, whereas you were watching somebody else the first time, whatever. My second viewing of Justin Blacklock this weekend, I watched him versus SMU and then versus Purdue, and he's got everything. He is not Madubuike. Madubuike is a good player, a good, solid player. This is not anything against Justin. Against Madubuike, but Blacklock is really solid, very quick, adds pass rush, holds up against the double. He's built like a block. He's very square. Plenty of rushes where he pushed the center straight back into the QB. Great penetration. draws holds, still grabs the running back even though he's getting held. He looks like a difference maker. I actually moved him on second viewing because I'd done Gallimore the day before, Neville Gallimore from Oklahoma. And I like Gallimore. I had Gallimore as my third DT. I moved Blacklock above him. And it's really close. And Neville's a great athlete, very fast, pretty fluid at his size, former basketball player. But Blacklock holds the double much better, plays the run very, very cleanly, and I think adds more pass rush more often. There are pass rushes from Gallimore, but they're fewer and farther between. Blacklock did something on almost every play, run or pass, in almost both games. And there's even a section in the Purdue game at the end. He's driving a double backwards. It's about 4:26 in the cut up of him versus Purdue. And he's got a double and he's actually moving them. Like not just holding them at the line of scrimmage, but moving them backwards. And you very rarely see that in college. People will tell you up and down, oh, this DT, he moves doubles. No, he doesn't. Very few DTs in college move a double.
What fascinates me with him is he's only 290, but he plays a lot. Like, I don't know where that power comes from in 290, but pound for pound, he's one of the stronger defensive linemen in this class because for a guy, even though he is built super squatty, so he's got a leverage advantage, still, you don't see 290 pounds being able to kind of anchor turn and take on a double from freaking Oklahoma. You know, like that's
quality offensive linemen are yeah. And people will say, oh, SMU and Purdue, they don't have the best lines. Well, I understand that, but they're not bad either. And you see him do things like, again, early in the Purdue tape, he strings an outside zone run all the way to the outside, plays through the trash the whole time, and drags the RB down for, it's either no gain or maybe 1 yard. And when you see that kind of agility and ability out of a guy with that much power, and he's getting to the boundary and dropping guys, that's rare ability. So I came away really impressed with Blacklock on the second viewing. First viewing, I thought, yeah, it's a good player. A lot of people could use him. And second viewing, I thought, whoa, this guy can be a difference maker. If he ends up in the right system, I mean, there's a lot of systems he would fit in because he's a very talented player. But I think about him like, maybe on the outside edge in Pittsburgh.
Ooh.
Yeah. I mean,
like
it's not
him rotating with Tuitt and Hayward, keeping them all fresh.
Yeah, like Tuitt, like basically playing the Tuitt role. That's the thing, is they have a ton of talent there. They don't need him, but again, what Pittsburgh asks its sort of outside heavy player to do, he can do. Yeah. And it's that kind of a role. Now, people say, is that the best fit? I don't think it's the best fit. It's certainly what I thought about when I was watching him, but could he go to Seattle, right? If Clowney leaves and play the heavy edge, right? With what Seattle asks the former Michael Bennett role to do, right? Yep, he sure could. And
I'm going to make you crap your pants right now.
Oh, please don't. I just changed.
They don't technically need him this year, but they might in a couple, and he fits perfectly for what they love, Baltimore.
Oh, don't. I get angry when we talk about people going to Baltimore. I saw a mock draft the other day where Zach Bond went to Baltimore, and I was like, of course he does.
Because it's such a Ravens pick of like, right, we don't need him.
That's a Ravens guy, right? No, Blacklock would crush in their system. Like, again, Brockers was supposed to be going to Baltimore. Brockers and Blacklock, not the same player, but, they've got a ton of talent on that defensive line. They always seem to rotate guys through or get guys, whether it's up high or in the middle rounds, who are just that strong, tough, hold the edge and flash, and then usually end up getting bigger contracts elsewhere and then sort of not producing because guess what? They didn't go to the Ravens system. They came from the Ravens system. So could totally see it.
Yeah, God, I really love that fit because now you're putting, just imagine a third down of Calais Campbell, Matt Judon, Blacklock, all right next to each other.
You think Judon's going to stay?
I don't think they're going to, because just because, how physicals are so tied into trades right now
true.
and
Yeah,
nobody can give a physical.
I really thought Judon was going to leave, and I still think he might, actually. If I had to put sort of over under, it would be like 55 leaves, 45 stays. I still think it's really hard to get talent. And again, we just talked about at the top of the podcast that this draft is not dripping in edge talent. And a guy that good is out there. Somebody's going to get tempted. Somebody's going to say, do I pick somebody in the, second round, or do I send that second rounder with something else to Baltimore to get Matt Judon?
Because I think the medical difficulties are also why Yannick hasn't been traded yet.
Yeah, and Clowney hasn't found more than 13, which is obscene. But we don't need to talk about that. Who's your second?
My second. Let me look at the list because I totally forgot. Oh, speaking of Big 12 defensive players, Kenneth Murray. Now I want to specify here: when you draft Kenneth Murray, you're really drafting a guy that you trust your linebacker coach to get the most out of. Mm-hmm. We had a discussion a few weeks ago where it's like, man, we've seen this before, and it's Tremaine Edmonds, where unbelievable athlete, but didn't really know what he was doing. And Kenneth Murray is that kind of guy where it's like he'll make plays where he runs down a toss to the edge that very few human beings can get to. If he's starting like 10 yards behind the running back and he still turns on the jets and gets to the corner and meets him before the sticks, and you're like, oh my God, that's a rare linebacker. And then the next two plays, he'll take the cheese and jump into the wrong gap. And he's always moving forward. He's never like scraping with the run. He's always going forward, always getting caught in the trash. And sometimes he's right and sometimes he's wrong, but he doesn't actually read. He's more of a guesser.
Yeah, no, he doesn't read. And my thing about Murray that drives me batty, because, again, his physical skills, I don't want to say unparalleled because that's not true. Even in this draft, there's linebackers who are, I would say, as talented physically. But he is tremendously talented physically as a linebacker. And when it works, when it all lines up, when he guesses right, it is jaw-dropping. It is like, did you just see that? And that reminds me very much of Tremaine Edmonds. And I was really scared of Edmonds coming out because his highlights were amazing. His tape was terrible. And it was because he guessed. And when he guessed right, the world blew up. I mean, it was a 5-yard tackle for loss where he almost grabbed the handoff and ran for touchdown. I mean, but you really hope that he went to the right system. And he did. He ended up in Buffalo, and he has gotten tremendously better, faster. And he's starting to realize all that athletic potential with reads, with keys, all the things he didn't have. He was also tremendously young coming out of college. Murray is young, but not that young. And you really have to hope that he ends up in the very same system. Speaking of that mock draft, I saw, you know who they got in the second round?
Who?
Murray.
Oh, God.
Yep. And Zach Bond in the first and Murray in the second. I was like, oh, God, they could do it too. Because, again, he could play for them on the inside. He could play for a lot of people on the inside. But you got to trust your specifically linebackers coach to be able to bring him along to play fundamental football and stop guessing. And the one thing that drives me batty about Murray is when he's engaged with a blocker, his head's down, he loses the ball. As soon as he is on somebody, he has no idea where the ball is. The guy could go right by him and he wouldn't even turn. He's just pushing. And he's got it. That's one thing. It's like corners that don't get their head around, right?
Yeah.
Linebackers that as soon as they engage with somebody, because look, you're playing linebacker, you're going to engage with somebody on almost every play. You cannot lose sight of the ball. And one of the guys I'm going to talk about later is the exact opposite of that, and that's one of the things I love about him. But Murray, he's a meteor, and boy, as a football fan, you just have to hope he goes to a place with a disciplined linebackers coach that can get him on the program.
Where I really want him to go is Denver, because Vic Fangio is literally the best linebacker coach in the history of the game ever. You look at his resume of linebackers that he's coached, it is unbelievable. I mean, Hall of Famers all over the place. And Alexander Johnson had a really good year last year. I think he's going to be the future there. But I think they still need another guy to play with him. And I think Murray, it's unlikely that he'll go in the mid first round where Denver picks. But if he slips into the mid second and they pick him up solely because they have Vic Fangio, who I think can groom him, that is the best case scenario both for Murray and I think for the Broncos, because it gives them even more speed at the linebacker position. And it's the best case scenario for Murray because I think he'll just become a better player in that environment.
Yeah, and best case for football fans, really. If you like good football, I mean, if you are a fan of a team that plays against the Broncos twice a year, you might not like that fit. But for everybody else, it's one of the things that people don't generally understand, or I find that people I talk to don't generally understand about this. They think I'm rooting for people to fail if I have an average grade on them, or I say they're not, tremendous or a first round talent. They think I want them to fail. And the bottom line is I don't want anybody to fail. I want all of these guys, all 300 or 400 of these guys that are going to end up in the league to have awesome careers and surprise the hell out of me. And for that reason, I want Murray to go to a place like Denver or like Baltimore where he can get everything out of him. Because again, those flashes are so white hot, and you just want to see that on Sunday. You want to see good football. You want to see great players playing to their best ability. And, Murray could do that, but if he goes to a place where they don't have a plan for him and they just kind of turn him loose as a free roaming hunter, you're going to see a lot of plays where you go, oh, dude, really? Yeah, he needs a strong hand, but he's got so much talent. So, yeah, I'm with you. I want him to land in a spot where he can excel.
Who's your number two? Because I'm looking at your list here, but I'm curious who your second one you're going to talk about is.
I'll talk about Davon Hamilton. I'll stay with my defensive tackles. I'll kind of just go in the levels of the defense here. It's, again, there's no ranking or order. He's not my number two. He's not my number two defensive tackle. It's just a guy that I watched and have watched several times. Again, I watched him down at your house and was like, wow, why aren't more people talking about him? He's got really good size. He's got surprising size, 6'3". I think he's 324. He's a big dude. Very fluid, much more so, and this may be because I watched him right after a guy like Raekwon Davis, who is even bigger than him. Raekwon Davis is a giant at Alabama, but is not very fleet of foot. He is a heavy-footed dude. Hamilton is not. Hamilton has, very loose hips for a defensive lineman. He can, knock the chop block down in front and hop over very easily. He turns and pursues to the outside. He hustles. Pretty strong versus single blocking, can move a guy backwards versus double blocking. He's not one of those guys that's just going to anchor and not give any ground, but he's also not going to crumble and end up on the ground. He can hold the double, at least slow it down and plug up the gap. He does that quite a bit and lets, the other talent around him at OSU come in and make that play. But it's got some pass rush to him when they turn him loose. He could be that sort of penetrating three, and at well over 300, that's pretty nice ability. He's not slow. Good ball awareness. We just talked about ball awareness and gap awareness. He can two gap if he needs to. And when he's one gapping, he's really good at sort of keeping his guy at least on one side so he can come off. He's really quick getting off the block on the inside. Just a really wide, sort of diverse skill set for a defensive lineman. And look, he's going to go in probably the third round. I've seen him as low as the fourth in mocks. I don't think that's right. I think he'll go before that, but this guy could go late second, early third. That's a value. This guy's going to play for 7, 8, 9 years in the league at a fairly high level and contribute in both phases, run and pass, right? So just feels like not enough people are talking about him. There's so many other people in this defensive tackle class, and he's not super flashy. He doesn't have as many sort of white hot highlights, but he has a lot of good plays where he's in the middle of the mix or setting the table for somebody else to make the play. And you need those guys. And he can make a play by himself, especially if he's single blocked or they're stupid enough to put somebody small on him. He can get around that guy and, bring pressure to the quarterback pretty quickly.
I kind of like the idea of him in Chicago as a rotational guy at first and just kind of learning under Akeem, because I think Akeem could do a lot of good for him. And I look at who they have behind Akeem and Bilal Nichols, and if your only other competition is Roy Robertson Harris, I think he could get a lot of snaps there,
right?
Yeah,
Nick
it was.
Williams had a really good year, and he left, and Hamilton could sort of take Williams' snaps almost verbatim, right? You could just bring in Hamilton as the rotational guy like they did with Nick Williams behind Bilal Nichols, who's going to come in healthy this year. And I think Nichols is probably the starter if he does, especially because he's a 2-year pro now. He's experienced. But Hamilton in that rotation would make them, that would be a very there'd be a lot of pop in that rotation, put it that way. Hamilton is a guy that most people say, oh, he's rotational, he's depth. He doesn't look like rotational depth when you look at him on film. He looks like a guy that could start. So, yeah, again, for a year or two, come in, play up and down the line, spell Hicks on one side, spell Nichols on the other side, pick up a lot of snaps, come in on third down for sure because, again, you can move. You've got some pass rush. There's some DTs in this class that really don't have any pass rush, and he's not one of them. So, yeah, I like that fit a lot.
Plus, I think Akeem, he has the best fork move, I think, in the league, where he just grabs your wrist and just lifts it up and just completely exposes your chest, and then he just pushes you back. I want Hamilton to learn that because I think he could be really, really good if he just adds a couple extra moves and just kind of let that power shine. So, again, he'll probably start out as a rotational player wherever he ends up. Again, he also conveniently fits Baltimore. They're going to come up a lot. But he's going to be one of those guys where he's a rotational guy, and then he'll sign a big contract somewhere and start and then be a really good starter for, probably, like you said, 8, 9, 10 years in the league.
Yeah, Hamilton's one of those guys I don't want to end up with another team in the division I root for. Right? It's when somebody else, like the Lions draft that guy or the Vikings draft that guy, Zimmer gets his hands on him, I'm like, damn it. I'm not going to be pleased if that happens. It could very well happen, but yeah, if he ends up, God forbid, in Green Bay, I'm just going to be upset because he's a quality player.
Speaking of guys, I absolutely do not want to end up in the AFC South. Josh Uche from Michigan is a huge draft crush of mine. He's my third guy. But the thing with Uche you got to know is you need to have a plan when you draft him because he's not a pure edge. He's not a pure off ball. He's kind of a mix of both. If you draft him, you almost kind of want to use him like an Anthony Barr type where you play him off ball, but you get him involved in the pass rush. Now, Barr, Zimmer, because he runs a lot of that double A gap look, they're mostly sending him up the gut. But I think Uche, you play him off ball at like 4-3 Sam. We saw him live down in the Senior Bowl. He was covering tight ends man to man, and there were some good tight ends there, and he was blanketing dudes. He is really fast, really fluid. He can cover, and then you bring him off the edge on third down as just an extra guy with speed, and he gives tackles trouble. Even Jedrick Wills from Alabama said that he was the best edge rusher he faced, and he played against a lot of really good ones, guys that are going to go above Uche in the draft. But he's so explosive, he's so bendy. Is he a complete rusher? No, he doesn't have a whole lot of power. But again, for a 4-3 Sam that you play kind of like the Broncos used Von Miller early in his career when they played 4-3 at the time, and they used him at Sam backer, and he covered and he played the run, and then he rushed off the edge on third down. You play Uche like that. Again, you have to have a plan for him, but he can be remarkably productive. So I want him nowhere near the AFC South because I really hope that they wouldn't figure out that he can be used like that because he could be a problem for really any offense.
Yeah, I agree. He's a little bit undersized. He's very fast. If you're watching his tape, you'll see him end up covering people step for step, 20 yards downfield, like down the seam.
KJ Hamler.
Guys that ran, straight pretty much go or post routes down the seam. And that's rare ability right there. But then you see some of the one-on-one reps versus tackles at the Senior Bowl, and he is, cornering like Mighty Mouse. He's got his elbow practically hitting the turf. Great bend, great lean, just getting around and under guys. Very, very fast. Again, like you said, not a power rusher, not going to have a strong inside counter. If he gets a tackle that really gets his hands on him, he's probably done. But he's so quick, he's hard to get his hands on. And the role I keep thinking of him in is like the old Detroit, not the Matt Patricia Detroit, but the old Detroit wide nine.
Oh, Where
right?
it's just go hunt.
Yeah, you get really far outside, and the tackle's looking at him the whole time, right? Tackle's holding there in his set, getting ready, and he sees Uche 5-6 yards outside him, and he knows what he's going to do, right? But he's thinking, he's already pulling before the snap, right? He's just like, I got to get out there because I got to beat him to the spot. And that leaves his sort of inside shoulder wide for the, who's ever inside, whether it's a 3 or a 5, depending on how they line up. If you get that guy out there really in space, in the gap, that wide 9, and even if you fake the blitz, right, have him go 2 steps hard and then, drop back and cover the tight end in the short zone because he could do it, that's going to cause problems.
Well, I'm pretty sure Jim Schwartz still, I don't think Jim Washburn's there, but Jim Schwartz does on third down kind of push his ends out every now and then. So if they're looking for a guy with just pure explosiveness and speed to add to the rotation, which we know Howie always does, man, I kind of like that fit in Philly, especially because he's not going to go early. But
no, and he doesn't have to be the guy in Philly. And I think any place, if that's the thing with Uche, is if you draft him early, if you make him into a first rounder and you put that label on him, he's going to be just like Floyd, right? He's going to be like Leonard Floyd. He's got to get 10 sacks or he's worthless. And Floyd's very much the same. He's bigger. He's not as fast. But in terms of his versatility, right, his ability to go forwards, his ability to go backwards, his ability to play wide, to cover, to rush, right? Uche is kind of the same way. And if you push him up into the first round, say in the mid-20s or something, everybody thinks he's got to be a 10-sack guy or he's worthless. If he goes to a place like Philly in the second, they've got a great defensive line. He doesn't have to be the guy. He can be, the can opener on third down and get 7 or 8 sacks as a rookie, and everybody in Philly will love him. So,
well, here's my thought. Their outside linebackers right now are Nathan Gary and Duke Riley. And I guess Jatavis Brown is competing for a spot too. He can beat all of them out for that role.
Oh yeah.
And then also rush from a wide 9 on third down, because why not?
Yeah, I would. Like you said, plan is going to be key for him because he just has a really interesting skill set. He doesn't play like he looks. If that makes any sense. The performance doesn't necessarily match the package, but there's a lot of performance there if you know how to unlock it.
100%. We talked about Kenneth Murray and the rawness of Kenneth Murray before. The third guy on your list is probably the opposite of Murray in almost every conceivable way. Why don't you talk a little bit about Logan Wilson?
Yeah, I really like Logan Wilson, linebacker from Wyoming. And if you're not familiar with him, you should get familiar with him. He's probably the 4th best inside linebacker in this class, depending on who you count in that inside linebacker class. Very modern linebacker. And you might look at Wyoming and go, modern? There's nothing modern about Wyoming. He's a cowboy, right? No, he's not. He's fluid in zone, flips his hips very well, great in pass coverage, shows some power on the blitz, good speed when he opens and runs. He can run with people. He is a coverage linebacker. And, one of my favorite things about him, he is a true linebacker in addition to that, right? He's an assignment sound player, uses his hands really well to stay unlocked from blockers, right? He can disengage at will. His reads are good. His eyes are great. When he's engaged with guys, he still knows where the ball is. He's working back towards it. He's freeing himself up. He's filling the other gap. Moves with anticipations on the throw. Just very capable with his speed and coverage ability of playing like the middle of a Tampa 2. At the same time, next play comes in and smashes the fullback on the lead block, right? Because he knew it had to be done. Got there early, made sure he eliminated the angle, basically stymied that guy in the backfield so his teammates could clean up the running back. Just a very good all-around linebacker. Few bad habits, but they're mostly coachable. Occasionally leaves his feet on the rush, but that can be coached up pretty quickly. And I don't think he's at his ceiling. That's the other thing I really like about him is he looks like a guy that's hungry for coaching. I think he can still improve with quality coaching. So again, all those great linebacker coaches we talked about earlier, if he ends up with one of those, he could be a great physical skills, speed, change of direction, power, and his eyes are just so good. He's rarely in the wrong place. And if you combine the sort of physical ability to get there in a hurry and not having to be very far away to start with, you get linebackers who are terribly, terribly effective. So I love the mix that Logan Wilson brings.
Yeah, I personally have not watched him yet. There's still a lot of linebackers I have to get to, and he's one of them. So I, unfortunately, cannot comment too heavily on him yet. But for you, since you have watched him, if there's one team that you think he fits as like a day one starter, who's your team?
Ooh. Wow. First one that came to mind you're highly familiar with. And again, they don't need him, but they just lost a guy who's pretty good. Be big shoes to fill. Panthers.
Oh. If assuming they pass on Simmons in the first round, of course.
Oh, sure. I mean, it's none of these predictions, just to clear it up for all the listeners. These aren't predictions of where we think they'll end up. This is just sort of, hey, what does he bring? What do they run? Does he fit that system? Does he fit the coaching? Does he fit the mentality? And we don't really know we sort of know what Matt Rule's mentality is, but we're not really sure in the pros. It's going to change a little bit. It always does, making a college to pro transition as a coach, but he could bring a lot of what Kuechly brought as a rookie. Again, this is not the all-pro Luke Kuechly, 6-7 years in the league. This is, coming in, he has a lot of the same skills. Is he as good as Luke Kuechly? No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying he can fill a lot of familiar roles for the Panthers and do it pretty well as a rookie.
You mentioned Carolina and Matt Rule and the kind of players that Matt Rule wants to draft. And, there's always a distinct advantage that college coaches have coming into the league because they're very familiar with a lot of these guys that they played against or had them play for them. And so they know a lot of these prospects better than most of the league. And so when I think about, okay, if I was Matt Rule, who would I want to draft to start on my defense year one? How about a corner from my conference who gave my amazing receiver, Denzel Mims, all he could handle, who gave Jalen Reagor all he could handle, who gave Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson all they could handle, who wasn't invited to the combine for God knows what reason, who dominated at the East-West Shrine Bowl, who just had a pro day that was good enough, not amazing. So again, he's not going to go early. But when you look at his tape, when you look at his production, there are very few corners that I think fit what Matt Rule wants in his secondary than Parnell Motley from Oklahoma, who's my fourth guy. And when you watch him, again, he went through a murderer's row of receivers this year.
Yep, and I would say straight pro-level receivers.
I mean, he faced a pro schedule in terms of wide receivers. And yet, again, out of Denzel Mims, Jalen Reagor, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, on top of 8 or 9 other games that he played in, he only allowed 3 catches of 20-plus yards the entire season. All year. Only 43% of the targets, and people threw at him a lot. They threw at him almost 60 times. He only allowed 43% of those catches. He is a straight press corner, length, technique, intelligence, eye discipline. People always like to throw out the Richard Sherman comp for any corner that plays press and has length. But with him, because of the intelligence that he plays with, because of the eye discipline that he plays with, he's a young corner that actually turns his head when the ball's in the air, which I feel like is a freaking rarity at this point.
It's about a third or a quarter. I would say quarter. I feel much more comfortable with quarter.
He runs 4.5 flat. He's 3 cone 720. Like, he's not a great athlete, but he just knows the position. And so all these receivers that are great athletes, that run in the 4.3s, that jump 40 inches, they can't get free because his hands are always in the right spot. His eyes are looking at the right thing. And he trusts that, okay, the quarterback has to get the ball out in 2.5 seconds anyway. I got Neville Gallimore in front of me. I got Kenneth Murray in front of me. Like, quarterback's not going to be sitting in the pocket all day. I just need to be good for 3 seconds, and I'm fine. And he gets that. So at 2.5 seconds, he's turning his head. The ball's coming. He sees a back shoulder fade because the quarterback has to get it out early. He stops. He bats it away. Did that against Jamar Chase. And it's like, okay, this dude just understands the position. He understands defense. He understands how receivers are trying to beat him. He's so smart. He's so technically sound. I love everything about him. And the good thing is he's going to go on day 3 because nobody's paying attention to him. But he fits what the Panthers need at corner so well.
Yeah, it was funny. You texted me about him when you were watching him, and I was watching Gallimore right after that. And we'd watched Gallimore before, but again, just as you watch a cut up of somebody, like you're like in the back of your mind, you're like, oh yeah, Brett said Motley was really good. And sure enough, you watch the plays he shows up on, and one of the things, certainly didn't necessarily see all those things, because again, when I watch a guy, I'm concentrating on the line, especially not even in the same level. It's not like I was watching the Oklahoma safety or something. I was watching a defensive lineman. But 3-4 times in the games that I was watching, I was like, oh, there he goes. There he is doing his thing. One of the things that impressed me about Motley is that not only does he have size, because there's a lot of guys in this class that have size, or more than a few, but they don't know how to use it, right? Big players that play small players that play big. The opposite of a guy like Motley is a guy like Amika Robertson.
Yeah.
Who's tiny, he's 5'9", and you see all these clips of him going after guys that are like 6'4" and just hammering the heck out of them. Motley is a big guy that plays big, right? He knows how to be physical. He knows how to use his length and his bulk to really influence wide receivers, and by influence, that's with air quotes. I mean, push them around, and give them a smaller catch window. Again, like you said, shed that angle, stop short, use that length to really close down the throwing window or get his hand on the ball. I like that about him. And what I like even more is that he's press, and he's going to be available on day 3. If you get a press corner available on day 3 that gets his head around, go ahead, throw a pick at him, right? You could do a lot worse. I don't really even care if he runs 4.6, right? Motley runs a 4.5, but you get a long guy that understands press and understands leverage and gets his head around, like, yeah, go ahead, take a shot. That's better than a lot of corners you're going to get out of college.
And I look at his skill set, and just speaking as somebody who watches a lot of Bears games.
No,
I mean he is right up their alley. I mean,
yeah,
right
he'd
up
be a
their
great
alley.
Prince replacement, right?
Yes,
and it's because he's bigger than Prince. Is he as good as Prince right out of the gate? No, but he has, again, the skills to play in that system. And the current defensive coordinator in Chicago is a former defensive backs coach. And Pagano understands how to use defensive backs in a way that best suits them. He is not going to make Kyle Fuller play press every down. He was, not going to try and play, Prince off every down, because, again, that's not what they did best. A guy like Motley comes in, he says, what do you do? I know what you do. I've watched your film. You're a big guy. You understand press. You use the boundary well. You're going to use your length to shut down those throwing windows. Like, hey, come in, do this. Again, you've got a good pass rush with Mack and Hicks. You only have to keep this together for 3.5 seconds. Same thing you were doing in college. Look, it's a lot of the same guys you faced in college, right? Mims, Rager, Chase not coming, Jefferson, the whole bit. And, guys he faced who came out last year as well. So,
who does he practice against every day? CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah. Who is a guy we haven't talked about, but boy, there's a lot to talk about with him. So, no, Motley's I think a good lower down the board pull. That is a guy that, again, there's always those guys, 3rd, 4th, 5th round corners come in. Either come in as a 3rd rotational corner, or, somebody gets hurt. They step up in year 1, year 2, and, they play pretty well. They don't allow a lot of big plays. Maybe they're not the highlight corner on their team, but I totally see Motley sort of stepping into that role and playing very well.
You kind of have a favorite lesser talked about corner yourself, and it seems like every time we do a mock draft, you're grabbing this guy in the 2nd round for Chicago, speaking of the Bears. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about Damon Arnette from OSU.
Yeah, well, obviously, his compatriots are getting all the press, right? Chase Young and Jeff Okudah, great players, and they're going to pull up a lot of the highlights. But when I got to Arnette and I got to watch his tape, I was really impressed. He's very good at what a boundary corner needs to be. He's got good size, for one. Again, a physical corner, can hit the jam. When he misses the jam, he's got the speed to catch up, which is pretty cool. Needs to add a little bit of bulk. He can still get muscled, but that doesn't mean he doesn't try or use his size. He's got very quick feet, super quick hips. His lower half is tremendously smooth, right? I think Okudah is the smoothest DB in this draft, corner or safety, almost technically perfect. Like, you can watch most of his reps and say, yep, that's teaching tape, right? Arnette is like that on probably 60 or 70% of his routes. Where he falters is in breaking routes because the OSU defense doesn't ask him to defend those really rigorously, right? If a guy is going to come up and run a tight little slant, he's letting that go to the inside. He's letting that go to the safety and Malik Harrison to go clean that up, right? So he doesn't play inside leverage as well as he does everything else. But what he is responsible for is that 15 to 20 yards into the sideline. And if the route goes there, he is all over it. And I don't mean handsy all over it. I don't mean, going to draw flags and the pros all over it. He just smothers those things. And he doesn't run one type of coverage. That's my favorite, is he varies between press, trail, pre-bail, tight man, all that stuff, and is proficient doing it. This is a guy that went back for his year, right? Chris Carter famously said some things about Arnette. Arnette said, fine, I'm going to go back and show you, right? And did. Pulls big plays, had a huge pick six. And the commentator actually said something about Chris Carter as he was scoring. This is a guy that went back and polished his game, and it shows. He is really, really proficient when he gets behind. He's behind on a fade in the game versus Indiana. Beautiful technique where he rips through, plays the hands, dislodges the ball. Just a very technically sound corner. And the things that he doesn't do well, I think, are very coachable. So that makes him terribly attractive to me. So I'm a lot higher on Arnette than a lot of folks, but I also know some folks that spend a ton of time on corners alone. Corners are kind of their specialty, and they're saying very similar things about Arnette when they get a chance to watch him, which is, this guy's better than you think.
See, I can see why you want him as an Amukamara replacement, because that's literally what Prince did, was I'm going to play outside leverage, I'm going to press you from outside leverage, and if you go inside, that's on you, because Roquan Smith is there and Eddie Jackson's there, so have fun, buddy.
Yeah, and again, it's very similar to what you said about Motley in a different way, which is Motley knows what he has and knows what he needs to do and sort of knows that envelope that he needs to play within to be successful, and Arnette is very much that way. Yeah, when he does it. And the other thing is, I said he doesn't play inside leverage very well. Against Indiana, he got victimized on the slant once, maybe twice. And then my favorite part about him, he learned, right? Denies the slant beautifully, just textbook, on the third one, right? He was like, fool me once, fine. Oh, you got me again, but I was close. Forget it next time. And he drives inside with good leverage, puts the hand in front. Great play. They called him for DPI, but it was pretty ticky-tacky. It was really, really good coverage. So, again, you're not going to keep getting the same thing on him. He's smart. We talked earlier about another player being experienced, right? Ashtyn Davis being experienced. Davon Hamilton is experienced. He's played a lot of football in the Big Ten, and it shows. He's, OSU is often talked about as DBU, right? He's holding up that reputation.
We've talked a lot about kind of some lesser known names, it's the Arnettes, the Logan Wilsons, the Parnell Motleys. My fifth guy is a name that everybody at least should have heard of by now, because he's going to go in the top 15 picks, almost guaranteed, and that's Javon Kinlaw from South Carolina. We got to see him up close and personal down in Mobile. Our first in-person exposure to him was that remarkable opening press conference that he had the day before practices started. And we just kind of look around the room and everybody's like, oh my God, like this is just an incredible human being, And then you watch him on the field and he's just beating the crap out of everybody with raw power, except for Lloyd Cushenberry, because Lloyd Cushenberry could anchor against a Mack truck, I think, at this point. But that's kind of what Javon Kinlaw is. He is a human Mack truck. He is unbelievable power.
I have a different comp.
Who's your comp?
Tasmanian Devil.
Yeah. Because, he just, he doesn't.
That's the way he plays.
He's a bull in a china shop.
Yep, ball and knives.
But I mean, it works, because if your entire goal on defense is to just absolutely destroy a China shop, well, that's your guy. He's not always going to do it pretty, but he's still going to end up in the backfield, and he's just so long, so powerful. South Carolina lined him up anything from probably like a 5 to a nose, depending on the situation. Most of the time, it was anywhere between 3 and 1. But every now and then you got to see him go up against the center and attack the snap hand and just drive him 5 yards into the backfield immediately. And you're like, oh my God, like this is just a different level of power. And I love watching Kinlaw, because you see what he is now, but if he gets with the right defensive line coach that can kind of control the chaos a little bit, get him to rush with a plan, take more advantage of his gifts, and not just be power all the time with the occasional counter swim, but you're attacking half a man to set up a move, 4 plays later. You see what he can be, and that's what's so exciting about him. And he's such an easy guy to root for. But I think the Javon Kinlaw that we see in 2020 is going to be a lot different than the Javon Kinlaw we see in 2023. Once he learns how to set up counters, once he learns how to really take advantage of leverage to let all that power come out, I think he's going to be a tremendous player. I think he's going to be a Fletcher Cox type defensive tackle and be around in the league for a long, long time.
Yeah, he's got great desire. He's a very basic player right now. And by basic, I don't mean simple or easy to contain. I mean, he has one speed. He has largely one move, which is I'm going to push you out of the way. And he can do it because he's just so damn big. We had a fun running commentary about Kinlaw because, again, we got to see him in street clothes at the opening press conference. And you leaned over to me and said, it says he's over 300 pounds. There's no way he's over 300 pounds, right? And I was like, I don't know. If I had to guess, you're like, what would you guess? I was like, I'd guess 290, maybe 295. Very muscular guy, 6'6"?
Yeah.
And it just doesn't look like he weighs 300 pounds. So I got to the weigh-in the next morning early, and you were still charging your camera stuff. And you said, hey, I'll be there. Can you start writing down numbers? Yeah, no problem. So you came in, and, sorry I'm late. And, did you get the numbers? And yeah, it took you about 30 seconds. And you're like, did they weigh Kinlaw? I was like, Brett, they weigh everybody. It's like, what was he? I was like, go ahead, guess. He said, well, because you said, well, because you're smiling, I know it's over 300. I said, yup. He said, 305. I was like, nope, 315. You're like, boom. Yeah.
There's no way. It's not physically possible.
Possible, but he is all of 6'6", 315. He plays incredibly hard going forward. I watched him versus Georgia. I only watched one game because we've already seen him in person. I've seen so many highlights of teams playing against South Carolina, plays he's wrecked. But I wanted to go with a line that, has two tackles that are going to go to the NFL. Traditionally puts out very, very good linemen. If you're talking about good linemen, it's like, Iowa and Georgia are two really good places to start. And there's a play in the Georgia game. It's about 4:03 into the cut-up. Pure power rush versus the double team. We talked about holding the double team. He's rushing versus the double team because he's interior, and they absolutely combo him because they know better. He gets the sack. He gets doubled.
I know the play you're talking about. He
gets the sack. It's about 4:03 into the cut-up. Watch it. It's staggering, right? He must get his hands on people first, but if he does, you talked about Hicks doing it as a defender, right? If offensive linemen use that move on him and get his hands off them first, he largely gets stuck because, again, it's just push. And there's a lot of push there, but if he's not able to really push with his arms, if he's just kind of got to push with his shoulders or his hips, it's not the same. If he gets his hands on you first, and there's a good chance he'll do that with the wingspan he's got at 6'6", he is really difficult to deal with. Now, his ball vision's not great. He needs some counter moves, but I'm with you. 2021, 2022, he gets with a good defensive line coach and continues to kind of drive and be hungry and improve. There's just so much there.
Yeah, it's really a limitless ceiling. And there's only 3 or 4 guys that we could say that every year where we're like, okay, there really is no limit here. He's one of them.
Yeah, again, I hope he gets to a place with somebody, and he's not hard to coach. He's an incredibly coachable guy. He approaches this whole thing, college football, the ability to play in the pros, as a gift. Had a very difficult upbringing, doesn't take anything for granted, and is just, what did he say when he was like, what's your strategy, or what do you, what do you think about? How do you think about beating other players?
I heard him at an interview, and and the guy's like, "Oh, what's your main move?" And he's like, "Push people out the way." And
That's right.
And the guy followed up. He's like, "What do you do if that doesn't work?" And he's like, "Push him out the way anyway."
yeah. That's his. That's his.
It's like, yeah, that's Kinlaw.
And if he develops any kind of nuance to go with it, look out. And I mean, look out now. He still makes plays. He makes a lot of plays versus the run, versus the pass, even with his sort of limited technique, because he just has so much frame, so many gifts. But if he starts adding some nuance, some better hand usage, some counter moves, doubles aren't going to be enough, right? You're going to need 3.
Speaking of tools, by the way, your last guy on the list to kind of round out our 10 gems on defense for this class. One of the most impressive athletes at any position in this whole class, and that's Southern Illinois safety Jeremy Chinn, who a lot of people have not had a chance to watch because, again, it's Southern Illinois. But you finally got to dig into his All-22 the last couple days. What were your first impressions on him?
Yeah, speaking of tools, guys, so Jeremy Chinn's very large for a safety. He's 6'3", well over 200 pounds. Runs very well. I think my favorite factoid about Jeremy Chinn is that he is Steve Atwater's nephew. And doesn't that make a lot of sense, right? When you start watching Jeremy Chinn, you're impressed with, first, the speed. He's very fast. He's fluid, even against lower level competition, which is always the trouble with trying to rate athletes at a lower level of competition, is the folks they're playing against are typically not going to play in the pros and aren't great height, weight, speed guys for the most part. But Chinn is special. You can tell that on tape. He runs very fluidly. He is not afraid to hit people. The very first play of the game against Indiana State, the Sycamores, yes, Larry Bird's alma mater, they run a flare, little slot screen, and he comes through the trash downhill hard and just jacks this poor little slot receiver who's probably about 5'6" or 7, hits him right in the ribs and knocks him about 3 yards sideways. It's a wow play if it's the first play you're looking at. And again, he'll play single high, he'll play near the line. He's got plenty of versatility because of his physicality and his speed. Again, later in that very same tape, the slot wide receiver comes at him, and Chinn, quote unquote, I put in air quotes, bumps him. His bump is about 7 yards deep, but the guy hits him and stops, bounces off him and stops. There's no more route after that. He just runs into him and goes, "Oh!"
It's that's a wall. Okay.
I'm not. That's it. I'm done. At that point the play is over. So attacks a lead blocker. He's a selfish or selfless player. There's another play in that game, comes up hard on the screen, ends up stripping the ball, forcing the fumble, and recovering it all by himself. So very easy athlete, great range. Always looks like he has a little bit of spare throttle left. There are very few plays where you see him open up to the top end. But it's going to be interesting to see how he transitions. Also wanted to mention that we ran a fun little contest. The pod has now been listened to in more than 60, that's 60 countries, and can't thank all of you around the globe enough for listening. But ran a fun little contest on Twitter asking for their top countries 2 through 6 in order, or any of the bottom 5, any 2 of the bottom 5. Had a bunch of fun interactions with listeners, and the winners, the folks that got the closest, I said, hey, tell me who you want to see. And one of the winners, shout out to him, said, I want to see Jeremy Chinn. I said, great, let me get his All-22 because I don't have it. And rating safeties without All-22, if you've tried to do it, is very difficult. They're off screen most of the time. You just end up guessing. So got his All-22 for the last couple of days, dug in. Unfortunately, the competition wasn't great. Indiana State and UMass. UMass was a tire fire this year. I feel really sorry for any UMass football fans out there that you had to sit through that. But you can see what Chinn has. He's got work to do, but if you put this guy near the line, he's Isaiah Simmons light in terms of size, tackling ability, speed to get to the play. He doesn't quite have the instincts. His instincts are good, but they're not that good. He does tend to lose track of where the ball is or not get his head turned around enough on things like quarterback runs where he's just focused on the wide receiver. And if he'd gotten his head around, he could have gone and supported the run. But instead, because he's fast, he's 25 yards downfield and he's just kind of out of the play. But very good player, was definitely the lead dog on that defense. Made a ton of plays. Yeah, I like Chinn a lot. And again, I think the 2021 Chinn or the 2022 Chinn is going to be much better than what we see in 2020. There will be a bump coming from a small school, but I think he's got the tools to overcome that.
Yeah, and you kind of mentioned, if you miss out on Simmons, get Chinn. And I like that because, again, because of his size, I think you could put him at linebacker and be totally fine. 100% be fine. I would put him at will. I'd put him at will linebacker and just say, okay, you're shadowing running backs on third down. You're playing some tight ends every now and then if we need you to. You're our matchup guy. We're not expecting you to take on guards that are pulling on power or anything like that. We'll let the defensive tackles and the edges and the mic handle all that. Like your one job is clean up runs on the edges and take away their matchup options on third down. You play him at linebacker in that kind of role, I think he could be really, really good.
Yeah, and I think he can because, A, he's bigger than some starting linebackers in the league right now, both taller and heavier. And the other thing is he's a good tackler. When he does get there, he doesn't miss. He ends up coming in really hard. A lot of times he will sweep his arm through the legs, and you say, oh, that's an arm tackle. When a guy's 6'3", about 215, and he's running as fast as Chinn, and you sweep the arm through the legs, the guy's not standing anymore, right?
Yeah, it's like a cheetah tripping a gazelle.
Yeah, it is a decisive tackle. He doesn't miss when he gets there. He uses his length to wrap when he can, when he's in good position. When he can't, he does that big arm sweep, and guys go down. That's not always going to happen in the pros, but one of the reasons I would feel pretty good about moving him up a level is because he is a solid tackler and he doesn't play like a typical free safety in terms of contact or even some of the boundary corners in this class who shy away from contact like it's, not what they want to touch or smell. That is not Chinn's game. So moving him up, I think he'd be comfortable with because he likes it. He actually looks like he's sort of bored sometimes in terms of the fact that he just hasn't gotten contact. He's like, come on, man, run something at me. A lot of plays obviously will run away from him and on the Southern Illinois defense. So he gets a little hungry for that contact, right? He'll come in looking for it. So I think he would relish a move like that.
Yeah, 100%. We've talked about a lot of guys today. Some big names, some not so big names. Again, these are just kind of our 10 favorites throughout the draft, not 10 highest graded defensive players, but just guys that really stood out to us that are going to be phenomenal values throughout day 1, 2, and 3. So we still have a lot more to talk about. Obviously, we have 2 weeks from today is when the draft is. So we still have our 10 offensive gems to go, and then we're going to be eventually, as soon as we can figure out the technical aspect of it, we're going to be doing a mock draft live stream. We want to do a live stream both before and after the draft on all 3 days. Again, we're trying to figure out the specifics of that for live streaming on the YouTube channel. So keep an eye out for that. As soon as we figure it out, we will. We're just still in the process. That was part of the reason why we're drinking so heavily tonight, is because we're
struggle bus. Don't remind me.
It has been a struggle.
I want to go to bed and not think about all that. But yeah, if anybody is really good with live streaming, especially to YouTube, we could use some assistance. That would be great because we want to bring you guys content. We're going to do it one way or another, whether it's quick reaction pods, but we would rather do it live and have you guys be able to interact with chat and send questions. We just think that would be a ton more fun and give you a lot more access to information in real time. So we're going to bring you as much as we can. Look for that coverage for sure. But surely reach out on Twitter if you've got some experience in game streaming, Twitch, any kind of live streaming. We would love that because we're both new to it and we want to bring you the content. We want to put it in that format, but we're not really good at it. We're finding out so far.
Yeah, we're good at watching football and not much else. That's our big lesson for the week. So it's a good thing our jobs is watching football because we really couldn't survive doing anything else.
Well, your job's watching football. I got another job, but it's we're happy to do that for you. We're really happy, as you can tell, to share it. It's the thing we like the most, and we'd love to do it, and we'd love to do it more and in more formats. So if you can help us do that, reach out. We'd love it.
Yeah. So thank you everybody for watching. I guess this would be listening. It's damn near close to midnight, so you can tell I'm exhausted at this point. But thank you wherever of the 60 countries you are for making the Bootleg Football Podcast part of your weekly routine. We greatly appreciate it. We will see you soon, same place, with our 10 offensive gems as we get ever closer to the actual NFL draft. Only 2 weeks away. Lights at the end of the tunnel, people. Again, thank you for listening, and we'll see you soon.